Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to use the JASP stats program to calculate a independent samples t-test. So in the prior video I showed you how to set it up in Excel, and this one I'll show you how to import it really quickly and then how to run the analysis. Very simple. First thing you do is obviously open the program. Once it's open on your desktop, click on File. Now you need to basically tell it what file to open. So I'm going to go to make sure Open is highlighted, and then Computer, and then I'm going to Browse. Now I saved it under the desktop, so you'll notice that it has already found the CSV or .csv file, independent samples t-test, that I saved. You'll notice that everything else is kind of grayed out. You can't really see any of the other files here because the program knows that those files are not in an acceptable format. Only this one is. So I'm going to click on that. You can either double click it or just highlight it and click open. And then you'll notice that instantly almost it pops up. You'll notice that it looks pretty similar to the way it was set up in Excel. You have a group column and then a test score column, and just as it was before, it has pretty much, shows you, which student is in what group and what their score was. Very simple to run the analysis. Once you have this up and running there, click on t-test, highlight independent samples t-test, which is the first thing labeled under t-test, so independent samples. Click on that. Now, all you need to do is designate two things. What is the dependent variable, and then what is the grouping variable? I usually do the grouping variable first. In this case, we already have named it group. So highlight group, we'll click on it to highlight it. Click on this little go arrow that sends that variable into the grouping variable box here. So you're telling the program that my grouping variable is that column labeled group. And do the same thing for dependent variable. If you remember back from the other video, I mentioned that test score was my dependent variable, but this program doesn't know it yet, so it needs to be told that this column here, test score, is my DV, my dependent variable. You'll notice that almost instantly the t-score is already calculated. So it's really convenient and very fast. A couple things you want to click on though. Although this is the basic information that we need, it's a good idea to click on other things like descriptives and also click on effect size, because those are two things that you'll need to include in your results section. And almost as soon as you click on it, those data kind of pop up there for you. So it's really simple. And I'll get to that in a second, but let's first look at the t-test here. You'll notice it'll say this lowercase t, this is your t statistic. You'll notice that it's this is, for those of you who don't know, this is a rather large number for a t-score, -4.415. And the p-value is also very significant here to look at because it has to be lower than 0.05 in order for it to be significant. So there's another video that I'm going to show or share with you on how to interpret these t-scores, and one of the things you have to look at is the p-value. In this case, the p-value is really, really small, way lower than 0.05, and that's a good thing if you're running an experiment and you want to see a strong effect. So this is essentially a really strong effect, and this shows you or tells you that there's a big difference between student scores in the control group compared to those in the experimental group. So very big difference. Moving down to the next box, you have the descriptives. So it's always a good idea in your results section to include things like the number of students, for example, in each group. In this case, there were 11 students. You see the 11 in group 1. And then it also will show you the mean for that group, the mean score, and the standard deviation. So although it is very, very interesting to note that, yeah, there was a really big effect. What was the effect? You'll notice that the mean for the control group was 49% on this test compared to the experimental group, group 2, who had a mean of 80. So just eyeballing it, you can see that there's a pretty big difference, but eyeballing it is never enough. We need to run the statistic to see if it's statistically significant. In this case, it was Very much so. So that's your tutorial on how to run an independent samples t-test using the JASP program from a file that you imported with Excel.